We're going live, so just be aware. Okay, we are now live. I'm going to get John Clucci from the audience. While Travis is troubleshooting, remind me, did we create, is there a vice chair for this austere group? I don't recall that.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. I have no sound. Are we waiting on anybody? I know that Tom is not able to join us tonight.
Then I think you're good to go.
Okay, and we're streaming. Good evening. Sorry, I'm a couple of minutes late, everybody. I'm calling to order tonight's meeting of the Scarborough Downtown Development Committee. We are fully attended -1, and let's get started with tonight's agenda. So the first order of business is the minutes from our previous meeting. Can I get a motion on the minutes from our last meeting?
Move to approve.
Art moves approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ryan seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Minutes pass unanimously. Okay, developers report. Rocky and Dan, you have anything new for us?
Dan, you want to jump in?
Sure, I'll go first. The freshest thing that I have to report is actually this afternoon. I walked through the grandstand with Nancy from the library, Bill Donovan on the library board, and their architecture team. Got to see the vaccination clinic in action. But also more importantly, in terms of what their mission was, is walk through really all aspects of the building to get them kind of oriented to it so that they understand it more than looking at it from the outdoors. I would say they all were kind of blown away by its grandeur, especially the grandstand component upstairs. And that was probably a 2-hour kind of site walk and walk through the facility. And my understanding, their next step is to have the architecture team kind of do a report and report back to Nancy and Bill. So as part of that, we talked also about, the downtown and the opportunities for a new facility or standalone facility that's not within the grandstand as well. So similar to kind of past conversations that at least the grandstand group had with Nancy and Bill. But so that's what happened today.
And Dan, we shared with them all of the reports and the engineering stuff that we had. I assume you went ahead and shared that with Nancy.
We had shared it with Nancy and Bill. It turns out the architecture team didn't have it. So actually after the site visit, I sent it along. So
Okay.
They have it now.
Good, because we plowed quite a lot of ground with that. So
Yeah.
might as well share it.
Yeah.
I'll jump in, I guess at this point. Dan and I have interviewed 2 different teams that could become excellent consultants for us on the downtown. But we have yet to make a decision. And frankly, we're about a week and a half behind where we wanted to be, but we got bogged down with dealing with MDOT and traffic issues and also dealing with growth management issues right now. So we're a little behind where we want to be. We hope to have a decision made. We had to go back to one consultant, get the scope expanded. And we just received their revised proposal today. So we're thinking it's probably going to be mid next week before we can take it to the rest of the Downs team to get commitment on which team we want to go with. We think they're both highly qualified, and it's going to come down to be a tough decision. I don't think we can make a wrong choice. So that's good news, but it probably puts us off a little bit. We're thinking probably deliverables that we could show this committee are going to be mid-May by the time we get there. So I don't know if was there anything else on your list, Dan, that we wanted to report tonight? Or
I don't think anything new from the last time we reported out. Activity level continues to be really high in the innovation district and also residential, but nothing really new to report out to the committee that you haven't heard before.
Hey, thanks, guys. Does anybody have questions for Dan or Rocky before we move on? John? Oh, John went back on mute.
Oops, you guys hear me?
Mhm.
For the consultant, knowing that it's going to be mid-May before the team might have something to react to, is there anything you think that this committee could provide in advance while that consultant is getting onboarded over the next couple of meetings that could help, the consultant along as well? Just curious.
I mean,
I haven't really thought of it.
Go ahead.
I mean, I'm feeling like the committee ought to keep plowing ahead with some of its work. I don't think anything really ought to halt, but specifically, unless you've got something to toss out to Dan, nothing comes quickly to mind.
Yeah, I was going to say that the modeling subcommittee has been doing a lot of work on other examples as well as kind of benchmarks, for lack of a better term, especially around the kind of town center principles that Bruce and Brian and Tom and Kim have done a lot of work on. So my intention was to feed them that information as background. As they get started, we have our own kind of set of things that we want to review, but I think it would benefit them and benefit the group to feed them things through that subcommittee, if it's deemed appropriate by the entire committee, to help kind of orient them to what this committee's thinking about and working on.
Hall, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, though not final, it seemed pretty clear this committee will be recommending retaining the grandstand. I mean, short of any kind of interior repurpose, but certainly the consultant should be aware of that expectation from this committee anyway. And Dan, I guess the other point I would just raise, to the extent that this committee, or I'll speak for myself, was enlightened by the photos you shared about reuse of industrial big spaces, I'd want to make sure Nancy or someone shares with their team those images. It's probably fairly routine to them if they're architects, but I think they're quite enlightening from my perspective.
I'll check with Nancy. It sounded like Nancy shared that stuff with them the way the conversation went today, but I'll confirm, Tom. That's a good point.
Anybody else? Okay, thanks, guys. Subcommittee reports. So the communications committee did not meet, and I didn't receive any messages from the public. Did any members of the committee receive any messages that they want to share with the group? Seeing none. The grandstand committee is put on hold for the time being. I assume there's no report from the grandstand committee.
We're enjoying our vacation, Travis.
Good. Okay. And the new committee that was formed 2 weeks ago for regulatory purposes also did not meet, but Kim Rand has joined the regulatory committee. So we're fully assembled and ready to get to work. Let's move on to the downtown committee. I know that Tom wrote some notes from the work of that committee last week, but he's not able to join us. Who on the downtown committee would like to report from your meeting last week?
I think Kim Bridgham was going to report.
Kim, you're muted.
It's going to be the Kim and Kim show, I think.
I'm just trying to find Tom's notes right now.
I have them, so I'll read the notes, and Kim, please interject. We spend a fair amount of time Google Earthing the downtown and trying to figure out access points into the downtown, and had some questions around any possibility of connecting 114 to the downtown, understanding exactly where that path would go in, but also, is there any opportunity for a road from 114 going through to the downtown to create that connectivity with Oak Hill? And there had also been a developer who was interested, looking for his name now, Mark O'Leary, I guess, is developing a neighborhood kind of off Sawyer, and had some questions about connecting to the downtown. Kim, did I get that right?
Yep, you did.
So I think we shot Dan a couple of notes around that. And I think it's worth understanding that those issues or that opportunity, if there is an opportunity. We also talked about, connecting Route 1, that the sidewalk ends before you get to getting into the Downs. And so it's just not a really good way to walk from Route 1 into the Downs. So that was a question, and connecting, maybe Memorial Park. We're just trying to figure out ways to connect the rest of what has been downtown Scarborough to the Downs, because we're worried about just easy connectivity, and will the Downs have enough? And this was another question to the developer. How many businesses do you think can go into the downtown? Because it feels like maybe it's not big enough to house everything that someone would want in a downtown. So that connectivity to Oak Hill feels really important to us. And then we just had questions about traffic and parking, and thought that was, something that at some point we need to have a conversation about.
Great. Okay, thanks, Kim. And Kim Rand?
And I was just going to say, Rocky and Dan, part of what we're stuck with a little bit is from it was the density of the downtown. We weren't sure how much, to Kim's point, how much would be in the town. And we thought maybe something like that would be coming out of the consultant's work. I'm not sure. And then we did talk about just the whole connectivity thing, really trying to connect to Oak Hill without having people go either to Payne Road, to Higas, or to Route 1, like straight through, if it's an option. Yeah.
I can speak to connectivity first. I think it's an easier answer. So from a pedestrian or bike standpoint, we're planning on some of the connections you mentioned, Kim. One is actually a connection to the Sawgrass neighborhood, which is currently a dead end off of Sawyer Road. And that's kind of, as the crow flies, it's pretty much in line with the back of the middle school. And so that connection will be made probably relatively soon, because a residential street that we're going to hopefully be building later this year, early next year, would need to make that, would be in that vicinity. And it creates a natural place to provide a sidewalk, bike path kind of connection. We're also connecting a water line there for looping water mains. Currently, the zoning doesn't allow a road connection from the Downs to serve kind of commercial traffic to connect out to Sawyer Road. And given the interconnected street grid we're designing for the Downs, then it essentially doesn't allow the street connectivity. That's something that could be changed in the future if there's support for it, but right now it's not allowed. So that's the shorter term connection, if you will, just based on phasing. We also, in the next couple of years, per our traffic permitting, transportation permitting, will be connecting that sidewalk on Route 1 that was mentioned from the Downs entrance to Millbrook Road, which is where the sidewalk ends today. There's a gap between Comfort Inn, the hotel, and that location. So that will be completed. And sometime in the future, when the O'Leary subdivision's being built out, and has a road system, I'm pretty confident there's a sidewalk system within that project. And they're showing potential for connectivity to the Downs with right-of-ways. So there's opportunities for connections there as well. We don't have plans that are real concrete up in that area yet. Those right-of-ways also, both at Sawgrass and O'Leary's, could allow for, they're 50 feet wide. They should allow for a road if that were allowed in the future. It's just not currently permitted by the town. If that helps.
Dan, I think just to add some further, the thought about a road out to 114, we actually had looked at that way early on, if you remember. And my recollection is there's quite a lot of wetland out through, you'd have to go out through O'Leary and then out through land that the land trust owns. And I think a bunch of that is wetland and didn't.
Right.
I remember we didn't spend a lot of time on it, but it didn't, it looked like that doesn't look like it would work very easily. So I do remember looking at that piece of it.
I would say that the cottages at Sawyer, this is O'Leary's project, has a right of way into the Downs, but it also has a right of way on the 114 side of their development. There's some additional parcels between where they end, where that project ends, and 114. But I think theoretically, we've started to lay the possibility for a connection, albeit circuitous. I mean, these are residential streets, so I think you need to keep that in mind in terms of ease of access, if you will. But there's certainly the connection, I think, is possible and likely all the way out to 114, avoiding Sawyer altogether, presumably.
So I think to sum it up, short term, like sidewalk connections can be made soon, very soon. So short term, that's going to happen in the near future. Road connections are a longer term prospect based on the current situation.
Dan, if I could, there's also I don't know how many acres, 10 or 15 acres behind the Juneberry development here. I can almost see it out the window. It was actually a mitigation project from, I think, when Exit 42 was built.
Yeah.
There's trails on this side of Mill Creek. And I'm not sure where your ownership is on the other side, but there's the potential for pedestrian connection in that vicinity as well, presumably.
Yeah, there is. There's a great potential for it. Actually, the Gristmill neighborhood and road has a trail and a right-of-way that connects to that land. We hit a bit of a dead end with the state on that because it's IF&W, Inland Fisheries and Wildlife land. So and I think you're right in terms of how it came into state ownership. They haven't so far. We approached them to want to build a trail to connect to the trails you're talking about, and they weren't supportive of that. So we're interested in restarting those conversations if we can get some help with that, but we hit a dead end. Their priorities are inland fisheries and wildlife, so they weren't super fond of the concept.
My recollection is, Dan, we thought it was a no-brainer, but we really couldn't get any traction with them. And I remember Jay even jumped in and tried, and we just couldn't seem to make any headway with the state on making that interconnection. But it really does seem like a good spot to connect.
Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly pleased to see if we can lean a little harder into that conversation. Maybe we can leverage some of our conversations with your traffic movement permit in DOT. Sometimes one agency can be a little more influential than we can.
Sure.
And to you guys, there was a second question from the committee about business density in the downtown. Do you have any sense of an answer for that?
I don't think at this point we really have a good grip on what that can support, and that's one of the key items that we want these consultants to help us with, is to try to come up with, all right, what will work, and what can we expect to have for end users, and what are their space needs going to be. That's a huge piece of the puzzle, and frankly, we don't have the answer right now, but that's a kind of a number one goal of ours, is to figure that piece out.
Right, but that's helpful, just knowing that that's kind of what they're working on. That will help a lot, or what they recommend.
There was one, I'm sorry.
Basha?
Go ahead, Kim. Go ahead, Kim. I will ask afterwards.
I was just going to say, there was one other thing I forgot to bring up that was in our notes. It was about the sign that goes into the downs, and kind of thoughts on what would happen to that sign. What are we thinking about signage? So it's more of a question for people to ponder than anything else, I guess.
The sign certainly has been something that's on our mind. We haven't brought it up. Kind of in a don't ask, don't tell situation with it right now. It is still serving a purpose. There is a business there that's still active and running, but I personally feel like it's iconic and it needs to stay no matter what happens with the rest of the downs. I think the cactus down on Route 1 in Saugus is a prime example of what an iconic sign can become. I think they did a great job with it. We're in a similar situation, but we probably will have a bit of an uphill road when it comes to dealing with that sign.
Well, Rocky, you're alluding to the fact that it's not allowed under the current sign regulations.
Current town sign regulations, as well as my understanding is the state doesn't allow it.
I was going to say, I don't recall you being as diplomatic as you're being here, so I appreciate that.
I'm usually not, but I'm in more of a public setting. Seriously though, there are some issues that we're going to need to deal with.
Well, I think if this committee thinks that that's an important feature, it ought to come as a clear recommendation. We may not know exactly the path forward, but I think, speaking to the issue would make a lot of sense.
Yep.
So it sounded like it was a question rather than an opinion from that committee, but it might be a good discussion for the whole group, I guess. Maybe not tonight.
As it came up, Travis, I was looking at heads nodding. I presume that was an agreement, but I should not assume that.
Do we want to? Do we want to take a few minutes to talk about it and decide if we want to make a recommendation on the sign tonight? I see Art. Do you have?
I think it's a historic landmark, just like the Citgo sign behind Fenway. I don't know if the state has anything that we could apply to, but I think it should remain as well.
Brian?
I certainly appreciate the historic and memorable nature of it. And, I support keeping it. I'd be in favor of, recommending and helping to create some provisions to, allow it to stay. I'd be really, really careful about creating an official historic designation for it. Sometimes when you do that, you end up really creating some tentacles that are hard to take away in the future. And the short-term gain is often not worth the long-term price. So I would just, be careful of any official designations we try to give, but I'm certainly supportive of the goal of keeping the sign and, working with our local regulations.
Does it make sense for this to be an inaugural subject for the regulatory committee to do some homework on? How about, I'll make a motion that we task the regulatory committee with doing some digging around the sign and report back as soon as possible.
I second that.
I don't know if we need to vote on this or not, but is anybody opposed to the regulatory committee looking into the sign? Seeing none. We now have a reason to meet, team.
Brian's already done our homework.
Tom,
Related to this, it strikes me from a branding point of view. I don't know that you've got presumably there'll be at least 2 more major points of access into your property. Do you expect to kind of replicate that, maybe in a smaller scale, maybe even in compliance? And I mention that really because I think branding, in my mind, should be part of our discussion in terms of creating a place and a destination, and that may not work exactly well with the overall development. So I just mentioned it as we're talking about it.
Yeah, and I don't remember where we wound up with branding and whatnot. I do remember early on discussing that sign, and my thought was we needed an identical sign on Higas and Payne Road. But my recollection is you thought that probably wouldn't sail. We could sell that.
I reminded you that the height limit for signage in town was 16 feet. I think that's what.
Well, we can, but we'll just get that changed. Easy enough. No, seriously, we did work on some branding and haven't pulled that back to the forefront, but that's all got to come back together with this signage package and figuring out where we want to go with that.
Yeah, so. And we did do some Payne Road in particular, signage concept planning that played off of that sign. But it's been a while because we've been holding kind of tight on that, kind of waiting for that intersection design to come together and development to occur on that corner. So timing's good with this group to think about that again.
Well, I'd advocate for a big enough sign at the Payne Road entrance to cover those transformers that sit about 20 feet in the air.
Oh, they'll be gone.
Oh, will they? Okay.
That's another one of our issues we've dealt with in the last 2 weeks, Dan and I. Power.
You have been busy.
So,
I thought, Tom, you were going to say visible from the turnpike. So
all I have to say is Cracker Barrel. You remember that fiasco?
Oh yeah,
I do. We don't have a Cracker Barrel in Scarborough.
So, Travis, I have a question actually. Actually, this is from the same meeting notes that we have, but the question goes to again Rocky and Dan. We had basically we discussed the challenges from connection to the Route 1. We talked only about the sidewalk, walking path and then the bike, but how do we connect the Route 1, the actual traffic from Route 1 to Downs? Right now, the only way is going through the Downs, the 2-lane road adjacent to the Comfort Inn, I think. That's the only thing which is allowing, but we are not entering into the Downs. We are going that Mill Commons and then the Gristmill lane. But once the construction is gone, now the Route 1, at least that lane opens to the Downs. But that is not for the main busy traffic as such. So what are we doing with the Route 1 connecting to the Downs? That's one question. And then the second one is, I live in Sawgrass. So, and then since the grandstand opened for the vaccination, there has been a lot of traffic. A lot of people are basically coming through Sawgrass and see, oh, this is a dead end. How do I go to the grandstand? So they are stopping and asking the residents. So then we reroute them. Okay, go to Payne Road and go from there, or go to Route 1 and go to that. So we are actually redirecting them, but there has been a lot of traffic. So that is going to probably continue until Google Maps or Apple Maps, they start figuring out all the connection ways and everything. But this is a residential area. So there is no direct connection to Route 1 from Downs. So what are we doing that? That's a second one. And these are not actually all of these these points are outside of the downs. So who is the point of contact, or who is going to deal with all of those challenges? So I
The
asked 3 questions,
Sawgrass
I think.
kind of mapping software driving people to Sawgrass surprises me. I guess at the macro level, it looks like an a location connected, but isn't. But I know that happens in some cases where sort of at a high level, it looks like an interconnected street. So I'm not sure how
Well,
that.
and the other thing that's interesting about that is that when someone makes an appointment for vaccinations at the Downs, they very specifically say the only way to get there is from Payne Road.
Payne Road, yeah.
And yet we
Paragraph.
still have, I mean, we have people coming through, we've got the Downs Road shut down. I mean, you can drive through it, through traffic can go through, but it's, we're asking people not to use it because we've got so much construction going. But I think part of the answer to your question about the access from Route 1 through the Downs is that will be a throughway as we finish our construction. That the Downs Road will continue from Route 1 in to an intersection with what we'll be calling Center Street. That'll take you out to Higas Parkway, or will take you through the rest of the Downs and out to Payne Road. So that will be a throughway. I'm not sure if I answered your question though.
No, I think you did answer, Rocky. There is a public comment, I think a few weeks back, that came through from one of the residents in Downs. That was, that is the only connection at this time from Route 1 to Downs. Will it make busier because there is a senior living construction going on, right? There are 2 buildings being constructed for senior living, and there is a lot of, elder people are there and a lot of kids, and then it's a residential area. If we have only connection from Route 1 to Downs, that's the only way, then it will become more busier street. So how do we deal with that? Again, it comes down to the density and how many businesses and everything are getting connected. So that's the challenge. That probably, do we have any suggestions, or who's actually dealing with all of those?
Yeah.
So go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was going to say, to have a viable downtown, the connection out to Higas Parkway is fundamental. Like, that's the businesses in any quantity aren't going to be, wanting to be at the end of a dead end street coming off of Route 1. So that's a real key connection that will be made once there's a certain amount of development kind of planned for the downtown area, which will be primary versus Route 1. It'll be used probably more. We're anticipating it'll be the primary route if you're coming from the highway, certainly. Coming from Payne Road, it would be either Higas Parkway or Payne Road, as Rocky described. So there'll be 3 primary entrances, but for kind of the commercial side of the project, Payne Road and Higas Parkway will be designed to kind of invite more traffic, and Route 1's being designed to have a connection, but not be quite as inviting. The more circuitous way, if you will, to get to kind of the downtown area, if that helps.
But the Route 1 end has been designed to take quite a lot of use. It's considerable. Sure. I mean, yeah. It's not like it's some, small side road. It's been designed to handle but there's been a lot of work done on traffic. Consultants have been working on this for 20 months now. And we're close to getting our traffic movement permit. We spent probably a little over $1 million in traffic engineering fees, and I think we have it figured out as to what has to happen. And there will be substantial improvements made in many intersections around the Downs to be able to accommodate the traffic that will be all part of it. So.
Thank you so much. And Kim, so there is a question about the parking at the entrance. Parking is greater question overall. We may need a bigger study, but do we have more information on that we should ask?
That was the public comment that came in, Basha, that question.
Okay, that's the one. Okay.
I think, if I remember correctly, we had we had planned to forward that on to Dan and Rocky, but also potentially have the downtown committee discuss it, I believe. We may be, and you know, I might be ahead of things, but we may be zeroing in on the need for that transportation subcommittee that we've been that we talked about on one of our first meetings. It seems like a lot of the issues about transportation in and out are starting to come to the fore. So something to keep in mind. Kim?
I think Kim Bridgham, correct me if I'm wrong, but we kind of talked about that at our meeting last week, a little bit about the ask for like a parking lot at the beginning of Route 1 or at Payne Road. And I think, I swear to God, I should have taken better notes, but I thought we kind of determined that people wouldn't really park down, maybe where they wouldn't park at the ends, that they might, like if a WEX went in or a big company went in, maybe we could use those parking lots inside for people to get to trails. But there probably wasn't room on Route 1 to create a parking lot, or a need for that matter. I think, I'm pretty sure that's what we talked about.
It is what we talked about. And we talked about, you know, if it's cold, if it's snowy, if it's raining, like there's a whole, like, do we really think that folks would park at the end and walk in? It's not clear to me how far the walk would be, but I think the three of us that were in the meeting didn't necessarily embrace that thought of having big parking lots on either end.
That's a good way to put it. Thanks.
Is this for trail access? Is that what you're referring to? Or
Yeah, like if someone wanted to come in with bikes or come in and just walk. We were thinking that it's more like a hub and spoke kind of a thing, that, you know, the core downtown and things are going to go off of that a little bit, and that there would be parking in the town center itself that could probably accommodate some of that.
yeah, I think there's potential there, certainly, and already in the innovation district, this is what you're talking about specifically, but we've built some parking already for trail access. It's geared for, you know, the amount of trails, and it's modest right now, and we have plans for a second trailhead parking area in that area. So we've started down that road, is my point, in the center of the project. You know, we're anticipating a lot of also on-street parking, but that may not be the best kind of trailhead parking if you're loading and offloading bikes. So we can think about the best way to accommodate that, if that's kind of a key goal within the project.
And it may be, Dan, that the fact that we have these trailheads, which is, I didn't even know that there was a trailhead parking lot over in the innovation district. So maybe it's just a, you know, publicity around some of that kind of stuff. Because I assume that's going to back up to like Warren Woods or something like that on that side.
Yeah, and we're working with the land trust on actually conveying them some conservation land to add to Warren Woods, which will tie in to their system, both with trails but acreage.
Cool. Okay.
Anything else on this subject or for the downtown committee? Seeing none. Oh, Tom Hall.
Just one thing that occurred to me, I don't, yeah, this is not confidential, but I know the land trust has under contract a parcel that sits between Warren Woods, which they already own, and 114. So they'll be, just thinking about access points, it's all through conservation land, of course. So there'll be pedestrian access through land trust property, from the downs through land trust property, all the way to 114, right about where the river crosses, just below Nunsuch Brewery.
Okay. Okay.
Kim?
If there's going to be a connection from behind the middle school, if I understood that correctly, if people wanted to unload their bikes at the middle school and ride that path, would that be possible? Is that allowed, I guess, to park in that parking lot at the middle school?
I think there is no direct way from middle school without going through a couple of streets and through Sawgrass and connecting over there. We has to cross the Sawyer Road, and the Sawyer Road is again the busy traffic. I think, the Sagebrush Drive, and then there is another one. So we have the walkway. That's where the kids generally go from Sawyer Road, directly go to the middle school during the summer or the springtime. But there is no direct access unless until if they go through somebody else's backyard and coming from there and then to the main street, Sawyer Road, and then Sawgrass. I mean, that's the path I use generally when I go to middle school or I went with tennis course.
Yeah, it's woods, right? It's a wooded area on the back of the middle school, and there's also, Basha, maybe Millbrook is there as well. Like there's a couple of impediments. That's why I said as the crow flies, you can connect the dots.
Oh, I see. Okay.
There's
Got it.
the potential for a connection, but there's some hurdles, I think.
I believe the town-owned property, there are portions that extend out and touch Sawyer Road.
Yeah.
But I'm not aware that there's any formal trail access at those points. Probably the ones that exist are informal, and as Basha says, probably go into someone's backyard that fronts on Sawyer Road. But I think we need to explore all those options for sure, if only to connect to 165 acres of land trust property. I think there's a real important connection to be made from the campus for that alone.
Anything else for the downtown?
So, if I could touch on that, and I don't know that that's that's within this committee's realm to work on that, but I do think it's time for somebody to probably start looking at, how's the town campus kind of get itself out to Sawyer Road at least. And then, as we've said, we've got a couple of natural connection points, which would be through Sawgrass, or we've also got Track View, which is a possibility. And then further down Sawyer, through Mark O'Leary's project, there could be future connections. But the town, I think, has a nut to crack as to how to get off the school campus and actually to Sawyer Road, because it does own frontage there. But, you've got wetlands, you've got, which brook did you say that was, Dan? Is it Millbrook? Yeah, it's Millbrook. So there's some problems, there's some question marks as to how to do it. But I do think that somewhere there ought to be a committee kind of thinking about that. Wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah, I agree, Rocky. And I know that from a safety perspective, right now, when you get to the middle school, it's a dead end. So if there's an emergency that came up in that area, there's some real risk factor, some risk to the way it's set up. So I think it's been on the radar from at least the school department's perspective, and I think probably police and fire, to have some sort of connection to Sawyer Road. I attended a meeting where it did come up, and I think it's important to some, but hasn't bubbled up to the level of actually becoming a reality yet. But I agree. I think it's something that we need to start looking at.
Bruce?
Just a general question. Rocky started to mention this, and it was something that I was thinking about. I think that this transportation issue is important to the entire project, but I'm just kind of wondering if we're letting a little scope creep get in here. Isn't our committee's attention supposed to be focused on the downtown area? It seems like this is encompassing the whole development and how that works. So that's why I'm wondering if we're starting to maybe go a little bit further than we should be on all of this. It's an important discussion, but I'm not sure if it's this committee's charge to look at that. If somebody's got some different thinking about that, just weigh in on it. But, looking over this, what our charge is, I don't see anything about this issue.
John?
I can, I guess, add or share my perspective on it. I think how we get from the municipal campus to the downtown and how they relate, I specifically added some language to try to make that in scope for this community, this committee. It doesn't mean that you're going to come up with all the solutions, but I think we need to at least be thinking about how this fits in with the overall downtown, which is bigger than just the Scarborough Downs portion. So that doesn't mean you're going to be designing roads, but you help us to see the linkage. I think would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, John. Because why the connectivity comes into picture is we have the Oak Hill, the library, schools, and then the Scarborough Downs. So we are saying the downtown is mix of these three pieces. So we are thinking in the perspective why this connectivity came is how do we connect all these three together as a downtown rather than talking only about the downs. So now the challenging piece for us is how do we make sure that there are businesses in Oak Hill and then there are businesses in Downs. How do we make sure people get access to both of them easily, not traveling through 5-6 miles down through the Payne Road and coming back towards or Haggis Parkway like that. That is one. And then the second piece that came into picture was if we wanted to connect our municipal campus, a library, school, how easily it can, if library gets moved to somewhere else in Downs, maybe Grandstand is one of the possibility, right? If it happens, if it becomes reality, how we will make sure the kids are safe, how the communication connectivity between these two. These are the questions came up when we met as a downtown subcommittee, so we thought some of these things are outside of the scope, whom to reach out, because we feel we are not the correct people to decide the factors, because there are a lot of connectivity issues or the rules and regulations which we might not be aware. How do we, like the crow way, like Dan said, but we know that's only the crow way, but in reality, whether is it a feasibility or not, which we do not know. That's why these things came into picture.
Brian?
Yeah, I can appreciate the importance of making sure that the downtown that we're talking about has connectivity. I do, and I don't want to get off on a huge tangent, but I do think that it's worth being tight on scope, and maybe limiting the input to identification of risk or identification of issues. And my view, which maybe aligns with what Bruce is getting at, is in the universe of people associated with the project, there's municipal professionals who are charged with reviewing how all of this fits together. There's design professionals who are charged with coming up with great ideas. There are development professionals who are charged and profiting from coming up with great ideas. And then it feels like we're charged with coming up with kind of the public view of either what we want or what we fear. And there, that's kind of, it's a lot, but it's a lot with some walls around it that are tempting to go outside of. And I think there's a little bit of wisdom to staying inside, maybe on the edges of, but inside those walls.
Yeah, if I could just add quickly on to Brian's point with a slightly different take. Like, I agree with everything you said. We have a lot of masters that are looking at every little inch of this project from a regulatory standpoint. You don't have to worry about that. But what they aren't necessarily looking at are things that the town can do, or this committee can do, or others can do to kind of solve things outside of our project. Like the reviewers are telling us what we need to do, not necessarily figuring out, okay, if the town did this or somebody else provided this road connection or this policy was changed, we could connect the downtown to the campus. So I guess I'm somewhere in between. I'm not a committee member, but I'm just identifying, like, if you have things that you think make Oak Hill better, make the downtown better, that we can't deliver, it's probably worth talking about, because then down the line, changes can be made, or the town council or others can make decisions to enable those things. like a road connection or a trail on school property or what have you, because we can't deliver that ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. We had our first transportation committee meeting last week, and we did talk a little bit about the downs, and they're all transportation gurus and get really excited, and the topic of connectivity did come up. And I think if we really want this to be a regional draw, we really have to figure out creatively what are 3 to 5 key things that the town needs to do or consider to really make sure the connectivity is there to really create that regional and semi-local experience. And so I do think it's within scope, and I do think we need your guys' help to kind of just guide us a little bit on, again, from what you see, what's needed, so then we can work with those appropriate stakeholders to try and make it happen if it's critical to create that regional draw that we want this place to be.
Right.
Yeah, John, I can appreciate that, and I'd love to have participation, but I do really want to throw out caution at, we are all wonderful people, and we're all very, very well intentioned, and things with connectivity and transportation are like highly technical with right answers. And I don't know that any of us have the training to like do it right and not make ideas or suggestions based on things other than anecdote. And so I tend to worry when we try to solve technical, like right answer problems with like public anecdotal participation for the sake of public participation. And so I think it's a good conversation to have, to really think about what to segment out and like what's appropriate to ask the public about and what's appropriate to leave to the pros.
Kim?
I think my thought is that, and taking kind of summarizing it, is that we have the opportunity to probably make some suggestions and recommendations. Like we think we need a connection either to Sawyer Road or 114 for the following reasons. I don't know that it's ours to solve, but I think it's ours. We own it to put it on paper and say, we were charged with sort of tying the whole thing together. And in order to do that this is what we think we need.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we have to design it. I think we have to kind of recommend it.
Yeah.
Bruce?
Didn't I understand earlier, Rocky said he just dropped $1 million on traffic engineering? I mean, it sounds like this thing's down the road. I mean, these guys are already pretty heavily invested in this already. And to say what Brian is that we've got experts working on this. We can sure make suggestions on this, but I do think that there's probably answers that are a little bit more formulaic than just what we'd like to see. I think that it's going to happen that way. I'm also concerned too that if we have too many subcommittees, that we're going to start diluting the committee's focus on what we should be really focusing on as well, which is the downtown. So with all that said, I mean, it's whatever you guys decide, but I just think that we're starting to drift a little bit.
I think that Kim threaded the needle well, which is so long as the focus of that committee is on their charge of how to incorporate the downtown with the other parts of Scarborough that surround it, and not how to, but what is it? What are the goals? What are the aims? And then leave the how to the experts. Then it's not mission creep. I think when we start to try to solve those problems, you're right. We're armchair experts who are, trying to be planners, and that's not our job. But I do think there's value in, like you said, Kim. We've identified that in order to make this feel like a part of Scarborough and not an offsite development, there needs to be a connection in these specific places, and I think those recommendations are useful. So it's probably just an important thing to keep in mind as the subcommittees meet and as we meet. Brian's great at this, just reminding us and Bruce as well, let's keep our focus on the charge, which is the downtown, and not how to solve the problem, or to build it ourselves, but how to identify what we want it to be. And so I think you threaded the needle well with your example there, Kim, and it's a good one for us to follow. I know that we still have probably a good discussion ahead of us from the modeling committee. So unless there's any reason anybody wants to keep this discussion going, I'd like to move on to the modeling committee. Seeing head nods. Who would like to present from the modeling committee?
Since Brian volunteered me to present for the other one, I'm volunteering Brian.
Man, I'll tell you, I jumped the gun, Kim. I didn't realize that Tom had two committees, and I thought I was volunteering you for that one. My goodness. Yeah, let me go to, Tom sent out some great notes. And I'll start the summary and just ask for others on the committee to chip in. We've been continuing to work on our world tour, and also building out the 10 principles tools that to work on to evaluate ideas for the downtown. Towards the end of the meeting, we decided to take that kind of what was a narrative tool, and try to turn it into a checklist, that would allow for kind of easy evaluation of new ideas. Taking those 10 principles and seeing, how new ideas align with them. It's still a bit of a work in progress, and I think at our next meeting we'll be talking about, and we started an email conversation about this, but the extent to which the 10 principles are an evaluation tool for an overall plan, versus how they can be used for discrete elements of a plan. We're sort of stuck in a bit of a philosophical loop right now about how best to contribute with all of this. We're anxiously or eagerly awaiting the first concept plan to give some reaction to, and that concept plan will be the work of the developer and the consultant coming together. And as we've talked, one of the other concepts we came up with was us developing a series of ideas to give to the developer. Hope that some of them make it into that first plan, evaluate what came in, what didn't, decide, perhaps maybe we're okay with some of those ideas not making it into the plan. Following on with the conversation about, what didn't get in, and, explaining and advocating a little bit more for the things that are really important to us, and then kind of iterating, through a process like that. We sort of, I think, struggling to find the first step of, how to start articulating, what these public elements are that are important to us, both in terms of, I guess, things and places, and, I think, also just kind of ideas and feelings for the downtown area. And so with that, I'll throw it out to the rest of the group to add on. Bruce?
Yeah, I think the short answer is we've been working really pretty hard on it. We've taken a few stabs. The bottom line is for tonight is we don't have anything to present. I mean, so I think that we're getting close. I think we're really on the right track of what we're trying to do, which is to give this thing some structure. And I think we're going at it correctly. I think we just need to decide amongst ourselves to try a couple ideas. And we've tried a couple, and they all seem to have some merit, but they're all falling a little bit short right now. So the bottom, I think that understanding that we're not going to have anything to look at until at least mid-May gives us still some opportunity to go ahead and formulate our thinking so that we can actually make a solid sort of presentation to the committee on how to advance this thing. So hopefully we'll have something more by our next meeting. I think we're getting close.
Kim,
I'm
is
not
that-
sure. That kind of is,
I think that's right. Kim,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
yeah.
Any questions for the modeling committee? Okay, thank you, guys. I do think, we are kind of in a holding pattern, which is why we may end up going down some rabbit holes like we did a few moments ago. So I do look forward to sort of not a complete start over, but I think between what the contractors start to work on with the developers and what your committee puts together for recommendations, I think that we'll be in a position later in spring to really dive in and come up with some concrete materials. So,
Yeah.
So thank you, Tom.
Yeah. Oh, and Travis, just real quick, I will mention that I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to do it in the next 5 minutes. This one pager worksheet that is kind of the current iteration is going to go up on the Google Drive in the modeling, the directory. So if folks want to poke around and see what we're up to, that's where we're keeping all our stuff.
Great. Thank you.
I was just going to inquire, part of the charge to this subcommittee is the world tour. I think you've characterized it, looking at kind of best practices and maybe worst practices. I don't know. But it does occur to me that some of that work might be very informative and helpful for the consultant sooner than later. So I'm just curious on how you're tackling that part of it. You're pursuing some of the suggestions that have come forward and getting acquainted with those projects.
I don't think we have a plan for that yet.
Okay.
And
Well-
actually, thinking about that a little bit, I think that we've taken a look at some of these projects that seems to visually appeal to us. I'm not sure if we've asked enough questions to find out what actually makes them successful, and what are some of the highlights. I mean, how would we, outside of saying we found these handful of projects that we really like, but I'm not sure why we like them.
Well, I mean, it could be kind of the somewhat superficial, but the architectural aesthetic, or I'm not sure what.
It could be the scale. It could be, I think that it's already been mentioned that we're going in a contemporary sort of direction here in terms of the architecture. But I'd like to, if we're going to present this stuff to a consultant, just the way I think about it anyhow, I'd like to see a little bit more meat as to why do we like these things. And most likely these guys probably have an understanding of these projects and might even be able to inform us better as to why they worked and didn't work. But we had mentioned, or I had mentioned that the one component that I thought that might be helpful, it'd be real sort of a pain to do, but is to talk to somebody of why were these projects good? I mean, we liked it. Did you like it? Was it successful? What worked? What didn't work? I mean, what did you wish you did? And what, those sort of questions too, of what we're not seeing. So, just relating to a picture without understanding, having more of an in-depth study, we're talking about color, scale, and texture and things like that, I think. We like the plans, we like the signage.
There may be some overlap with the regulatory group. I mean, it strikes me not only the developers, if you're able to speak to them, might give you a sense of what, why it worked or why it didn't, but also the host community could probably be quite helpful in answering those same questions.
Yeah. Tom, an example of that is, we've talked about Mashpee Commons as, one, potential model to look at. And it was kind of interesting that, it's a development that has been developed, right? So it's, one thing that we can look at that was done. it turns out they're actually going through a redevelopment and expansion process right now, a lot like ours. And so I think there's things to learn from their past, but also from their current. And they've got their own past that hopefully they're learning from. So I think there's some conversations and just some observing that we can do that probably has a lot of opportunity to learn from.
Well, if I could be helpful reaching out to my counterparts in those host communities, by all means, pull me into it.
Oh, that'd be great. Thanks.
I don't know if they'll take my call, but I'll try.
Well, quite frankly, I volunteer if you can make a connection, and if the rest of the committee, I'd be happy to participate in that conversation if you could pave the way. And anybody else on our committee that wants to join that discussion, maybe we could pull that together.
Yeah,
I think that'd be very informative.
Yeah, just give me a list of communities that or projects.
Did you had somebody in particular, or this one, was it the Mashpee? Did you have a connection there?
No, but there's someone like me. There's someone like me there that I presume would be willing to talk to me.
Yeah, that'd be great. Any connection you could make, I think in any of them, I think it would be good info. And if you could get some times, let's see if we could set something up.
I'm pleased to do that. I'm just not aware of what you're all looking at. So if you can make me, if there's some shining examples, make me aware.
Okay, I think we can do that. I think, Brian, you got that list? It sounds like you have a complete list there, Brian.
Yeah, Tom, we'll circle up with you offline.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you guys, because I read Tom Madden's notes, it looks like you had a conversation about design charrettes. And
yes,
about that conversation, because I think that could be a really useful tool for us to have something like that set up. So could you just talk a little bit about that conversation?
It was Brian's idea. Brian, why don't you go ahead and expand on it?
Well, let me see what I can recreate from that original idea. Yeah, so the root of the idea was like that somewhere inside we've all got great ideas. But sometimes with the help of a professional, we could have those ideas directed to something really productive. And so, the thought was, what if we were to hire a professional to help guide a design charrette that involved this entire committee? To maybe focus on, different elements of the plan to identify, certain public elements or whatever, that would help the downtown thrive. And what might a design charrette like that look like? And so we were starting to kick around that idea a little bit. And talking about what a charrette entails, and the fact that by it's kind of a guided conversation to help stitch together kind of the root feelings and root commonality that people in a community might have, and tie it together into the language that can turn into a successful development. And so we were starting to explore that as a way to really bring about the ultimate output of the broad committee, which is supposed to be a bunch of ideas for public elements to enhance the downtown.
Dan and Rocky, is that something that you guys have considered or looked into, a round of design charrettes?
So, I was part of the modeling committee discussion, and Rocky and I haven't had a chance to talk about it kind of in detail, but I've been part of plenty of charrettes and agree that that's a creative process and a productive process. So I think there's an opportunity to certainly have something like that. We just need to sort out what's the format of it, what's the scope of it, because there's elements that are really going to be development driven, private sector driven, and then there's elements that are public driven, and there's ones in between. And as Bruce talked about with our modeling committee, there's also, it's not bad, it's good actually to throw out wild ideas. Some things just can't happen, but it's good to get them on the table and socialize them, so to speak. So I think we'd open to the concept.
Bruce?
Yeah, it seems like the person that is, well, you need a facilitator for these charrettes, and the person who would be the best facilitator, I would imagine, or I'm pretty sure it would be your urban planner that you have. Now, I'm not sure if that's currently in your scope of services that you're working out with these guys, but if we could work out an opportunity to spend, those things, it's not going to last less than 4 hours. But, I think that there was an interest of our committee interfacing a bit with your urban planners. And that would be the place to do that, to throw these ideas out. It would sort of begin and end there in terms of the committee interfacing with the urban planners. They could get a sense of what our committee, as well as I would imagine this would be open to the public, would have on their mind. Just gather up all that information and go back to their shop and, work it out, synthesize it. I mean, that would be my suggestion. And I'm not sure if we do that before you guys have a plan or not. I mean, I think that this bubble diagram isn't going to get into some of the details that the charrette's going to bring forward. So I could see this actually happening after the original concept plan and to chat about it more. But then, it's certainly an opportunity to talk about the connectivity off-site to the place, and then also having an opportunity for us to basically just throw all of our spaghetti at these guys and let them see if they can, work it out. And with you guys, and then I think everybody would have an opportunity to feel like they've, well, not only feel like it, then everybody's had an opportunity to go ahead and register their thoughts with the with your planner, and then they can sort through that whole thing themselves and guide us all through, quite frankly. That's my thinking about it.
Anybody else questions or comments for or about the modeling committee? I think it opens an important question that I have if we just want to move on to committee discussion, which is we now sort of have a time that's not too far in the future where the developers are going to have a consultant, and we will move into sort of a new phase of this thing. And so I guess I wonder, what do we want to accomplish, or what do you guys, Dan and Rocky, feel like you need for us to accomplish between now and mid-May or the back half of May, when we're going to start engaging on some more concrete ideas with your developers? Something like this, to Bruce's question, valuable to do before or after? What else do we want to go into the middle of May armed with and agreed upon? And I'm just going to toss that out to everybody. What does everybody think about what our goals should be over the next 5 or 6 weeks? And what do you guys want to see from us on the development side? A little too deep on you, didn't I? Maybe that's a good agenda item for our next meeting that we can put some thought into. Is, we're in this odd position, and it does feel like we could be in a space where the dam could kind of open up in 6 or 7 weeks to us doing a different kind of work. And so maybe if we want to think about adding to our agenda for the next meeting, what that run up to the middle of May should look like for us. And it could be a useful conversation. Any other general committee discussion items, questions? We can also just make this agenda setting. What does everybody want to talk about? A little bit ahead of time for once. Brian?
No, I'm good, Travis.
Okay. Nobody feels like talking. Okay. Agenda
I would sure like, I wish
Oh my God,
Rocky.
Bruce, of course, yes, go ahead.
Of course. Well, if everybody's not going to talk, I'm shutting up here. If you guys please give it some consideration about this charrette, because I think that would be a good. I think everybody would get everything off of their chest, and your planner would be the right guy to go ahead and for us to talk with. So if you guys could really give that some serious thought, I think we could have all these conversations that we're talking about, but not having.
I think it's a great suggestion.
I think Dan and I will chat about that. I wonder with, where we are with the present state of the world with COVID and whatnot, how we actually pull that off. I do think it would be a little more helpful after we had something on paper, but that's not very far away. But
Yeah.
Maybe we think about, is it just this group and not invite the public, or, if we feel like we want the public or we got to have the public, then we got to figure out how do you actually do that physically.
Brian?
So we can chew on that a little bit and come back to the next meeting, I guess, with it.
We could have it at the grandstand.
Yeah.
You got all the chairs spread out.
Rocky, I think I think it'd be appropriate for it to be an event for this committee. After all, we're the group of the public that's charged with coming up with these ideas and having them drawn out of us. And if there's an interest or an urge to have public viewing or participation, I would imagine there's a Zoom type broadcast that could be done to accommodate that. But between COVID and the importance of keeping it an intimate conversation for creativity purposes, and the fact that this is really meant to be a supportive tool for this committee to do its work, I really think it's very appropriate for it to be kind of a limited engagement.
All right.
So what else for our next meeting? What else do we want to discuss? We have currently one additional agenda item. Do we want to dive in on this more, or the idea of the charrettes, or is that just sort of fit into the general conversation about our short-term schedule? Brian?
Travis, I wonder where we're at with the outreach group and or maybe that's communications. And the reason I ask, I was out one morning talking with somebody who I haven't seen in a while about this group, and they made a comment. Oh, I'm really glad that the public's getting some input into all this with all the money that we're spending on this. And I was like, oh, all right, well, terrific. And I'm like thinking about, I'm looking at the list of attendees on this thing and not seeing very many people attending, and listening to the one or two emails we get, and just wondering, if that's a broad-based sentiment, or how we can interact just to let folks know that we are being very mindful and very thoughtful and very stewardly of the public's interest.
Yeah, I can take a minute on it, and I, of course, welcome Art and Sarah and John to jump in too. John has been writing great updates that have been going out in the town newsletter. I think he's done 2 of them now. We've a lot of what we had talked about in our first meeting was that such a significant amount of outreach was done on the subject during Planapalooza, and a lot of the work that's been run up to where we are now. We've made ourselves, we've made our presence known through public channels, and how else people may find us, we don't really know. I mean, we've done our best to use the resources we have to say, here we are, come watch our meetings, come tell us how you want to contribute. We haven't talked about holding any more forums, just because we feel like a lot of that work has been done in the past 2 years. And the result of it was this committee. But, you know, that being said, it's certainly a discussion that should continue among this big group. If there's a charge to us to seek more public comment through more aggressive means, not the best word, but you know what I mean. We'd certainly be willing to hear it. Art, John, Sarah, anything else you guys want to mention on that?
I would just add, you know, I think, again, like you mentioned, I'm doing stuff in our e-newsletter. It feels like at least once a month to kind of just share updates on where we are and really push people to try and come to the meetings as the primary way to provide input. I know our social media, our communications person is always posting on social media about it. You know, we probably haven't fully leveraged the newspaper as a means to get the word out. So there might be an opportunity. I think at one point we had talked about looking into the Forecaster and the Leader as an opportunity to post something. And I think that's probably still a hanging action we need to do. But I would encourage everybody here, you know, to consider, and maybe this is something we can talk about at the next meeting, like put something and write something short, write a short LTE to the Leader, you know, each week, just to kind of, again, share your experience and what you're doing as part of this, just to, as another means to get the word out. So I think there's more we can probably do. I also think, though, involvement will probably be much more needed, or people will be much more wanting to participate, I think, once there's something a little bit more tangible for people to react to. So I would think once we get something from the developer and once this team has had the opportunity to really, you know, put their mark on it, I think that's probably when there's going to be a need for much more broader awareness and communication, and maybe creating new opportunities to get some public input.
And that's, and it is, you're absolutely right, John. We did talk about a column in the Forecaster or Leader that I had promised to work on and did not. But you're also right that it may be more strategic to do it at a time when there's something to challenge the public's imagination more. Art, you went off mute. I'm guessing maybe you.
Yeah, no, I was going to echo what you had said, you know, of all the work that had been done in the past. And John has, you know, very good ideas as well. You know, it's hard getting people involved and volunteering. Let's tell them, you know, we're going to put in a casino. We'll get people here.
Sarah?
The only other thing I'll add is I do think there's an opportunity, and maybe something we can pick up offline, to just give people an update on when we'll have more information, like some milestones for them so they know when to engage. That's all I think we could add.
And so maybe after our next meeting, when we sort of talk about our short, medium-term plan, we can we can make a real attempt to put that out into the public.
Yeah, and I'm pleased to have my communications machine assist you in that effort when we're ready to roll something out.
That'd be great.
Brian?
Yeah, I think that's terrific. And you know, as I kind of hear that conversation, two or three things come to mind. One is, you know, the notion of milestone announcement, I think, is really good and important, particularly if we're going to be making decisions. And so, like, one I can think about is if we're going to be making a decision about a recommendation on whether to keep the grandstand at a future meeting, it'd be really good to announce that well in advance, you know, rather than announcing that we made a decision afterward. And I think, you know, that's one way to really gain the public's trust and to, you know, get engagement. And so, you know, telegraphing the upcoming decision rather than the past decision, I think would be good communication. The other thing that comes to mind, which I don't know how far to go with this, but you know, there's some, you know, loose, you know, informal networks that you can think about in Facebook land, you know, whether it's the moms group or some like neighborhood group. You know, there's like, you know, well-known collections of people who are fairly active in social media that engage a lot. And if you want to get a message out, that may be a more effective way to get participation than you know, other ways. And so
Those
we
are
may
both suggestions.
we may think about, you know, which ones of those to use and how to use them.
The moms group is extremely powerful.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, great suggestions. And maybe it's time for us to meet again. I'll ask maybe John and Art. I know Sarah had to jump, but maybe we should meet again just to talk about these things, you know, before we dive into our run up to mid-May. I can also invite my daughter up every week with a new idea because I'm sure she's got plenty of them. So
I think that's a great idea, Travis.
We can always supply it. Do we have any other agenda items that we want to make sure we cover at our next meeting? I think we can have a good conversation with what we've put out so far. I don't see any attendees, but I might not have access. Tom, do we have any members of the public who want to address us tonight?
We do not.
Okay. Anything else? Is there anything else we want to make sure we get on record before we adjourn for the night? Seeing nothing, I would welcome a motion to adjourn. So move Art. We have a second.
Second.
Yeah.
Hi, Kim. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. See y'all soon.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Guys.
Have a good night.
Good night.
All right.